Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, Mr Speaker, this bill is another sock in the eye for Kiwi wage and salary earners. It's part of a raft of unfair and unjustified workplace laws that remove some of the most basic of rights that workers have enjoyed for many, many years. This government has turned its back on Kiwi workers and their families, and let's not forget that they're bearing the brunt of the GST increases, the miserly tax increases at the lower end for the lowest paid, which nowhere near compensate it for increased costs, and there's no investment in jobs, no investment in schools, no plan. The majority response from the Select Committee, and let's be clear about what that means, it means the National and ACT parties, demonstrates that this government is not prepared to listen to anyone who disagrees with them. The bill started badly when National used its National Party conference to announce the extension of the 90-day no rights law to all workplaces and to restrict union access rights, because they had nothing else to say at that conference. They had no plan to stop New Zealand drifting further and further behind Australia. And then the government went further, pushing this and the Holidays Amendment Bill through the fast-track parliamentary process. The public were only given 3 weeks to make submissions on both bills, both substantive bills and major changes, and large numbers of submissions were ignored. So despite this, I want to thank the submitters, all 8,000 of them. The Minister referred to hundreds, but there were 8,000 of them who went to the trouble to tell the committee and this government what they think of this lousy bill. I'm disappointed, but not surprised that the government has completely ignored many of those submissions and the protests of those who oppose the changes to this bill, and the fact that there are only minor and technical changes are being suggested. However, I'm used to it. I've been here a while now, and with that party in government. But shop worker Margaret Dornan has said today that she's gutted. She's gutted that Parliament has ignored her submission on the employment law changes being debated today. Margaret said that she and several other members of her union, the National Distribution Union, wrote personal submissions, and they came along in person to tell their stories to the Select Committee. They did a fantastic job. It's not an easy thing for an ordinary low-paid worker to do. And I think Margaret speaks for a lot of workers who feel the same way. The thousands who made submissions, that more than 22,000 workers who went to meetings and rallies up and down the country to oppose this awful bill. What was clearly laid out in the Select Committee, and we will hear more about it during the debates on this bill, is the disdain that the National Party have for working people. They're quite happy to be the puppet of an American corporation and sell out the labour rights of a major group of workers, and they're quite happy to rush into the House legislation that removes rights such as meals and rest breaks, because there's a little problem with air traffic controllers, but they ignore thousands of submissions and thousands of workers protesting in our country. Mr Speaker, I want to talk about 2 areas of the bill in particular. There will be more time to talk about other things during the committee stages. The first one is access. Now, there was no clear evidence before this bill was introduced that the issue of access was a problem. There was no problem to be addressed here. The Minister's own department says there wasn't a problem. Employers said there wasn't a problem. And we heard no evidence of problems at Select Committee. The only reason for change is ideological, supported by, I think, a very small number of employers who want to make it as difficult as possible for workers to have access to their units at work. Now, what's interesting is it appears the Minister actually originally proposed a more watered-down access change. In an August 11, 2010 Cabinet paper, the Minister was proposing to exclude these consent requirements if a union representative was entering the workplace to deal with matters concerning the health and safety of union members. Now, that never made it into the bill. It was passed through Cabinet, and the paper said it was to ensure that the risks to the health and safety of people in the workplace could be dealt with appropriately. Now, as I said, the bill admits any of this, and so I'd like to know if the government now believes it's okay to prevent the health and safety of people in the workplace being responded to appropriately. I do acknowledge that the Select Committee made a small improvement to the access provisions by cutting down the process of seeking consent and the reasons from 4 days to 2 days. But it will still enable employers to say no, give a reason, and then have the union representative having to challenge that reason. That could take weeks and even months, and it will require legal challenges. That will require legal challenges, and this is going to be an absolute gift for lawyers. The second area, Mr Speaker, I want to talk about is the extension of the 90-day trial period. Once again, we're left wondering why the government decided to extend this to all workplaces when their own research on the existing provisions for workplaces of 20 or less are far from convincing about the benefits. There was no demand that I'm aware of for the extension of this law to all workplaces apart from the ACT Party. Even as late as June 2010, the Minister was proposing it be extended to medium-sized enterprises with workers of 50 or less. But the Minister got rolled. She got rolled in Cabinet and she got rolled by the ACT Party. That's very worrying. Now, today in the House, Mr Speaker, I asked the Minister of Labour how she could be confident that this 90-day trial period scheme will improve productivity in schools, given that we've heard yet another example today where a skilled chef in Timaru was fired under the scheme for using too much sauce and aioli, for goodness sake. The Minister replied, I thought very flippantly, quite easily, which shows an ignorance of the issues that we face in this country around productivity and future skills shortages. I thought skilled chefs were in demand. I thought John Key was trying to keep skilled workers in New Zealand. As we've gone through the debate on the extension of the 90-day no rights bill, I've asked the Minister quite a lot of questions to try to understand what she really thinks the rights of workers, if any, are in this situation. Firstly, we had the Trade Me jobs, with 90-day trial periods advertised as a pre-requirement. The Minister kept insisting that 90-day periods are voluntary, and if a worker didn't want a trial period, they didn't have to have one. In other words, if they don't want it, they don't get the job. Now, it's not so for workers who are set by work and income to do a job. The Minister for Social Development and Employment confirmed that a job with a 90-day trial period is treated the same as any other job. A worker does not have the right to turn it down because it has a trial period, and in fact, that worker, if they did, would be punished with a stand down. Then I tried to understand what the Minister believes the obligations of good faith are for a worker employed under a 90-day trial period. Parrots good faith religiously, but it seems the Minister really doesn't understand and in fact had questions about it as well. I'm sure, we've heard the answers, the advices that the employer will have to be responsive, communicative, blah, blah, blah. But the bottom line is there was no remedy available to workers in relation to breaches of good faith in a 90-day dismissal situation. They still lose their jobs, they still have the stain on their record, they still have their confidence whacked, they still have to explain to the next employer what happened at their last employment. As I said at the beginning, Mr Speaker, this bill has many other provisions that I will give more attention into in the committee stages, but there is nothing in this bill that will build more productive New Zealand workplaces, reduce unemployment or help bridge the income gap with Australia. The government has chosen instead the low and cheap route of undermining the ability of Kiwi wage and salary earners to improve their wages and conditions. The only possible message for Kiwi workers from this is that the government doesn't care about them, their families, their issues or communities.